Courage is one of those factors, one of those characteristics that differentiates the American military from every other nation's armed services. On the morning of June 6, 1944, one of the most extreme acts of courage, competence, sacrifice was displayed here at Pointe Du Hoc when the Rangers scaled 90-foot cliffs to attack, seize, and hold a German encampment. A German encampment that was responsible for artillery and some of the heaviest machinery in the Normandy area. No one thought that this mission was possible, but there was one organization that remains today capable of such, and that's Ranger Battalion.
Frank, your dad, Norman, was up above on D-Day.
Absolutely.
What was he doing? What was he?
They were looking for armor coming in to cut off the invasion.
What did he fly?
P-51. He was flying a P-51 Mustang, and they were flying out of Watersham Field in England, and they left about 5:30 in the morning to come this direction.
Pointe Du Hoc was the home of the majority of the artillery used by the Germans. The range on these weaponry was massive. It had to reach Omaha Beach, it had to reach Utah Beach, and it had to reach out into the English Channel so that they could hit American ships as they came across. We talk about leadership. 2nd Ranger Battalion was led by Lieutenant Colonel James Rudder, one of the most famous Rangers to ever have served. In fact, the majority of buildings, so some of the buildings in Ranger Battalion are still named after him across the country. Colonel Rudder was actually wounded as he came off one of the landing craft on D-Day and continued to lead his men up the 90-foot cliffs. Inspiring leaders, the best leaders, get people to do things that they otherwise would not do on their own. There's a quote here that I think sums that up. This is from 1st Sergeant Leonard Lommel from 2nd Ranger Battalion. He says, speaking about Colonel Rudder, he talked to you softly but firmly, like a big brother. He inspired you to do your best. You just wanted to die for him.
How many missions did your dad fly?
81.
81 missions.
81 missions from 44 on to 45.
Wow.
He flew, my dad flew his last mission on April 29th, just before it was over.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and he flew at the Ardennes breakthrough, where the Americans opened up on him, and he made it back to Saint Desire, where he got the aircraft in and they repaired it. In the Ardennes breakthrough, they were actually living in a barn. My dad and all his guys, they got the corner, which was a chicken coop, but these guys were all very, very well engineered. They're farmers and they are graduates in engineering. They built themselves a little house in a chicken coop. Great photographs, but you could see the stress on the pilots. They were very, very stressed out, and all their flight gear was hanging on nails, and they were sitting on a bunk that we have. But it was just like they aged, at that whole thing. And through the years, my father would open up on it a little bit, but combat, actually shooting anything, we wouldn't talk about it.
We're standing up on the top of the embankment right now, and every direction that you look, there are massive craters from the artillery that was dropped by the American forces to prep the point for the Rangers to come in. This hole behind me is probably 20 feet deep. It's at least 50, 60 feet wide. It's absolutely massive, and they're as far as you can see in every direction. One of the points that's important to note is that as the Ranger Battalion made their way to the point across the English Channel, a navigational error put them 3 miles off position, and the element of surprise was gone. It took them 40 minutes to get 3 miles as they traversed along the coast and eventually made it to the base of the cliffs.
And the P-51 was picked up by the Americans, but the people, they have photographs of all the people with this Mustang, and it's in their museum. And this guy tracked my dad down. Unfortunately, my dad died a week or two before this letter got to him, but it told the story of him being shot down by Americans. In our family, in December 24th, all of us growing up, my dad was real quiet. And it wasn't till after he had passed, and I had talked to a couple of people that flew with my father, said that when they were opening up on these guys, they were shooting back. So it was friendly fire. Mm-hmm. And so I think at that point, everybody was just very, very solemn after that.
We're standing on top of the observation bunker. You can see the entire encampment from up here. Out to each side, you can see all the way to the beaches of Utah and to Omaha on both sides. This was a great spot for the German lookouts to be positioned to see the invading American forces as they came into the area from the English Channel. You also can see from up here how devastated the land is after the bombardment of the American artillery as the Rangers came across at the bottom of these cliffs. You see how big they are and what they had to scale to make their way up here. Absolute tremendous act of courage. Nobody believed that this would be an area where the Americans could come across. They thought it was impossible. But Rangers, they do the impossible.
It was a real story. These guys had so much fun doing what they were doing. But when my father was in the cockpit, it was all business. And like my father would say, it would be 45 minutes of boring flying, followed by 15 minutes of sheer terror. And it was people coming out of these aircraft that were hit with flak B-17s going down, people just jumping out without a parachute. This stuff just ate on these guys. When they would get back into the airfield, they would tax into the revetment. His armament and his crew chief, they'd be up, jump up on the wings, hold my dad out by his arms, because you're sitting there for hours, just in the cockpit. And the first thing they do is pump alcohol into them, get them going. And then rip them out, and they were on their way to where they were going to declassify or not classify, where they're going to talk about the mission and see where they're at, who went down. You know, this guy went down, this guy. And my father said, you know what, it was just terror from that moment on, because you had to go to bed with that. These guys going down like that. And my godfather flying a B-17 was hit in the nose. The nose was almost sheared completely off. And his co-pilot was wounded, he was wounded, navigator was dead, bombardier was dead, waist gunner was wounded. He got the plane back to England. As soon as he came around the hospital and he could talk, he told them, send me to Fort Leavenworth, I'm not doing this again. If I don't have long-range fighters going in there, I don't want to do this anymore, and my life means more to me than going over there. Send me over here. So they let him fly a desk for about 6 weeks, and then they put him back over. And he went and finished his 25 missions over there. Yeah, and my father, he lived till he was 88 years old, and but he left all of this instilled into me and my brothers that, you know what, they were the best. They were the greatest generation. And if they could get away with it and have fun, just as you did, and don't tell me, you know, you went in and yeah. Anything you guys get away with, you did. I mean, because it's fun, you're kids, right? That's what kids do, is that right?
All right, we're at the base of the main gunning camp. You can even hear my voice echoing as it comes back from underneath here. But imagine a main gun sitting under here, shooting out into the open sea as the Rangers made their way to the base of these cliffs. The scale of these cliffs can't be underestimated. Behind me, they dropped 90 feet directly into the sea. That's what they came up. Grappling hooks that they fired up over the top to hook on to anything, any rock, anything that they could grab a hold of. Many of them failed on their first attempt. So the Rangers who sat at the bottom coming off the boats were getting shot at from an elevated position, and one after another stood beside each other to raise ladders, fire grappling hooks, and scale these cliffs. Second and 5th Ranger Battalion fought for 2 days to gain control of Pointe Du Hoc. It wasn't until June 8th that reinforcements arrived from both Utah and Omaha beaches. 225 Rangers came across up and tried to scale the cliffs. At the end of those 2 days, only 90 remained combat effective. We talk about sacrifice, we talk about courage, we talk about commitment. This was one of the most critical parts of the D-Day invasion. Guns like this were entrenched and designed to prevent the American landing force from gaining a foothold on these beaches. Because of the efforts of Lieutenant Colonel Rudder and the rest of the 2nd and 5th Ranger Battalion Rangers who fought bravely to scale these cliffs, the D-Day invasion was a success.